So I am Sarah Skeens. I've been doing e-discovery for probably about 10 years now. I've worked in law firms, state government, and for service providers. So I've got kind of a background doing all sorts of things. Fact manager is something I've worked with for, probably 6 years now. So it's one of those things where I think it's kind of the not really given the right that it should be, or taken up to where it should be. So that's kind of, right now I do consulting, helping with strategies for ESI protocols, fact manager, and analytics is my main focus.
I'm Julia Byerson. I have been in the e-discovery industry since 2009, started as a contract attorney and sort of moved all around. Similar to Sarah, I've been on the provider side, the corporate side, I've been on the law firm side, so I've sort of seen the industry from a few different perspectives. Particularly, I'll sort of be focusing on the legal hold piece. I was at Blue Cross Blue Shield for a while and did a lot of work with the legal hold product there. So, essentially the goal of our session is to show you, essentially legal hold and fact manager. I think most people see as sort of the bookends of, the e-discovery process. You start with hold and you generally end with fact development. And so what we want to show you guys today is, you don't have to wait until your case is basically done and you're, a week out from depositions or witness prep to actually start developing some of those facts. In fact, some of the information you learn right up front during the legal hold process is going to be able to, drive, and you're going to get a lot of those facts much sooner than waiting till the end.
We should add we're both from Advanced Discovery / Altep.
Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to put on our detective hats, and we're going to guide you guys through.
And these are children's size, so they might pop off halfway through.
So today, obviously we're going to be talking about our two main toolkits in this session, which are legal hold and fact manager. And we're going to really approach it from an investigative perspective. It's really learning about the who, what, where, and why. So we're going to inquire, interrogate, and we're going to do some intelligence analysis and then synthesize all our information at the end.
So we are investigating today Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Errant Employee. Super exciting. So your super sleuths, Sarah and Julia, we have taken on a case at Advanced Discovery, and we're using our deduction skills. We've talked to Mr. Jonathan Weatherly, who's the head of engineering at Weston Associates, and he's telling us of Harlan Carbuncle, we found a nice little scary picture. He's a former employee, lead designer. There was a top secret MRI machine, and he was hired to build this machine. So Mr. Weatherly thinks that Mr. Carbuncle has taken the IP information to his new company, Black & Brown Engineering, which has just recently released a press release with a brand new MRI machine that looks suspiciously similar to what was going on at Weston Associates. So we are working with that case team to solve the mystery and get all the information we can before we start our document review.
So the first thing that we're going to use as part of our investigative toolkit is our legal hold tool. So how does that workflow typically work, right? So the first thing that happens generally, there's a triggering event. Essentially, there's something that happens and now we have to put out a legal hold. The next, portion of that. And so in this particular case, there was this press release that came out saying that, Black & Brown was kind of having this MRI machine, and again, suspiciously similar to something that we were developing, at our company. And so for us, that was sort of the triggering event that told us, we really need to think about putting a legal hold in place to try to really wrap our arms around what the e-discovery issues are here. So then we're going to analyze our duty to preserve. Obviously, if we want to take this case to trial, we have to make sure that we're all the material that's out there, we're actually taking it, preserving it, so that we have evidence to use. We're going to define the scope. So we're going to figure out what do we need to preserve. Is it emails? Do we need to preserve ESI documents? We need to figure out who are the people and the players that we need to talk to. That's going to let us know, what information is actually out there. So once we do that, we're going to implement our hold. And again, in our scenario, we're going to use Relativity legal hold because it's elastic. It allows us to scale really easily. The reporting features are awesome. So it's going to allow us to track what information we've put out there and what's coming back from these custodians. And I think the most important part is once you implement a hold, it is an iterative process. So as we learn more, we always want to make sure that we're modifying the hold to really match up to what's going on in the case. So whether that's adding new custodians, releasing custodians that we learn no longer, or never had, never participated or were a player in the case. That's really important. And as we learn what kinds of documents are out there, we want to make sure that we're modifying the language of our hold to ensure that those are being preserved along with the initial information that we thought was important. Enforce and examine. We want to make sure that once the hold actually goes out, people know that there's a hold and they understand their duties under that hold. And if they don't, we want to make sure that there's a manager that they're working under, that their manager can sort of prompt them and say, you haven't responded to this and you really need to, make sure we're acknowledging and preserving our documents. And then really the last part is monitor and remove. So we constantly want to be evaluating responses to our questionnaires, making sure we're actually utilizing that knowledge, and then again, removing custodians that we learn no longer, need to be on the hold. So why do we want to use an automated legal hold tool? I attended a session earlier today, and a lot of people, when they, I think, first started doing this stuff, it was very much done in Excels, right? Which is fine if you have 2 or 3 people, you have one main hold, but ultimately, I think in today's world, that's not something that is going to work for most of the cases. We're dealing with cases with 20, 50, 100 custodians, so there's no way that something like that is easily managed. The other issue that we constantly deal with, people don't stay in a job function for 10 years, right? They constantly move. Employees are terminated, new employees come on board, or employees get new job functions and get new managers. So we're constantly, rather than having to manually manage this stuff, we already have a tool, right? Our HR tool is generally managing this stuff for us, so why not essentially plug in our legal hold tool directly into our HR tool and let the HR tool do the work that it was designed to do, and let legal hold sort of pick up that information and get basically an automatic feed from that tool. So we want to be able to link it through the company's email. We want to be able to templatize holds. Holds can be, if you've ever gotten one, there has to be some legal language. There's document categories. So we don't want to have to redraft or, basically reinvent the wheel every time. So we want to templatize as much as possible, changing, little bits here and there that are related to our specific matter. But essentially, we want to templatize and go. It's going to obviously cut down the time our, let's support our paralegals are actually spending time drafting and managing these holds. We want to, again, be able to enforce and examine. We want to issue questionnaires, get our responses back, and then plug our responses into our fact manager tool. And, most important, we want to make sure that we're constantly monitoring and removing people. I think another point that sometimes is often forgotten is it's all well and good to issue a legal hold to a custodian. So I'm going to say, Susan, don't delete your emails. But Susan actually doesn't control. She certainly can control, what she can manually remove, but ultimately IT controls the system emails, right? So you also have to make sure that not only am I sending a notification to my case custodians, there also has to be a plan to send legal hold to your IT custodians, because ultimately they're the ones who are controlling the system. So it's all well and good that I don't delete my email, but if I have an automatic roll-off, obviously those emails are going to roll off the system even if I didn't physically delete them. So it's really important to, I think, understand your data map in your systems to make sure that we're issuing holds to the key players and the business and the IT recipients as well.
So the next piece of our toolkit is Fact Manager. So one of the big things with Fact Manager is we have all sorts of ways that we try to organize our information. The big thing I see is Excel spreadsheets. multiple Excel spreadsheets, multiple tabs, multiple individuals inputting different things, and a lot of times what you lose is those connections. The other portion that you lose is when you're writing anything really, and you're trying to back it up with a document or some type of fact, you're having to go and look for that. You're having to go into Relativity. Where is that document? Oh, let me go look in the spreadsheet. There's also that lack of the link between your documents and the information you have in your spreadsheets. So what kind of sets Fact Manager apart in terms of organization is that it's in Relativity. I'm linking my documents directly to my information. Everything's there. So rather than being on this hunting spree, halfway through, you're already doing the work from the beginning of the case. So why not take the couple seconds, organize it, and then when you get to that point where you have to generate some type of summary judgment or some type of memo or some type of report, everything's right there. And you just pull it, and your documents are there, everything's supporting your facts and your information. So that's kind of the big takeaway that I want people to get from Fact Manager, is that you have those direct links now with your documents within Relativity. And you can generate reports, you can analyze, you can actually export those documents out with the report. So if you have someone like a partner who won't touch Relativity, someone that's doing something offline, you can provide that information to them through Fact Manager. So with Fact Manager, we were able to take Jonathan Weatherly and Harlan Carbuncle, I cannot say his name for the life of me, and we have the MRI machine press release hooked to both of them. So just to give you a quick overview what Fact Manager looks like, you can see it's built into Relativity, which is great. I cut off the tabs, obviously at the top, there would be a tab for Fact Manager. So again, you're not leaving what you're doing. You can see there's facts, there's issues, there's people, organizations, interview questions, and then we've got all the reporting features, including a timeline builder. So it's really easy to go in, to view the information, to see where your links are, and to work through. So we can see down there all the different things that something can be linked to. You can click on a document right from there, see it. You can link it up in your coding panel. So while you're coding documents, you're actually seeing the facts and the information and entering them as you're reviewing. So if you think about it, you're not spending a whole lot of extra time, and down the road, you've built a whole story about your case that in seconds you can run a report and get all that information to the surface rather than, oh, I saw this document. Does anybody remember what doc ID it is? Or I love when I get the list of doc IDs and they're missing half the numbers. And I'm typing it in and I'm like, no, you're missing, digits here. So this takes away a lot of those problems and it helps you get to that information faster.
And I think too, keep in mind, this is, we don't have any documents in our story. So we're saying there's no reason to wait even until you have collections and process data and kind of a full-blown review team. We're doing this. We know kind of our key organizations. We know our key people from the start. We're going to start entering it because it's going to make it a lot easier than get all the way to the end and then have to spend days sort of entering all of that stuff. So we're doing it right now because we're not pressed for time right now, but we might be, 3 months down the line when we have a hearing coming up.
And you save yourself from surprises. So that's honestly the one thing that I think we run into the most and causes the most cost, is that halfway through, all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a server? We didn't know about this, server. And then it's this whole, I'm doing one right now. We had to go back and do a whole analysis on an extra server nobody knew about. And knowing about those things up front and knowing what obstacles you're going to run into and just generally having a better picture of what your case looks like, you're going to have your workflow is going to be a lot cleaner. You're not going to have all these like, oh no, roadblock, go back here, go back there. You're going to know from the start where you're going, where those obstacles are, and what you're actually dealing with.
So I think, another kind of part of our toolkit is built into the legal hold tool. There's a legal hold questionnaire. So I feel like a lot of times, the custodian interview step is sort of skipped, right? In lieu of, well, we know emails are involved and we know server documents or network shares are involved. But a lot of times we're not taking the time to sit down with a custodian and say, okay, where do you keep your documents? Are they in this cabinet? Are they under your desk? Are they in this box in this empty office that you've just been sort of stashing away? And so that part of the process ends up becoming really important. Sarah, you were just telling me a story where, the custodian sort of had to be asked multiple times, how they were actually, they were asked if they were kind of storing PSTs locally, and they didn't quite understand the question. And so when you ask them, are you dragging and dropping stuff onto a folder on your machine? And they're, oh, yes, I do that. That's what I do.
And if you don't have your tech person available for a custodian interview, this is great because someone's typing it up. They're basically memorializing it for you. And so you can have a tech person look at it, and there may be a key word that sticks out to them, and they're like, that doesn't sound right. Because policy is not always being followed at all. So it's a great way to kind of memorialize and actually see it. And then you're kind of doing a prelim to, you still probably want to do some custodian interviews. This is going to narrow your pot. So let's say I got 50 custodians. I'm not going to interview 50 custodians. I'm going to send out these questionnaires. They do it on their time. Now I got a better idea, who do I actually need to talk to? So you're wasting less time with your custodians.
Absolutely. And I think, another piece of it, for example, when I was on the corporate side, we had a legal department share. That's where people would sort of dump all their data. And if you were going to go in, before I sort of came on board, they would regularly index and process a terabyte of data that was on this share when they needed 300 documents from it. And I think, once you start issuing these questionnaires and you actually ask them, which specific folder do you keep data on the legal share? And they'll say, oh, this case, the data for this case, I have a case-specific folder. And now I'm only collecting 300 targeted documents in this folder rather than trying to index and search and collect a terabyte of data for, use of this much. So that's, obviously a super important part is really trying to narrow your data set from the beginning, because as we know, e-discovery costs can be astronomical. So if we can save time and money up front, we're doing a service for, our clients or our corporation or our partners. And I think pretty much, we have serial litigants, the C-suite people, they don't have time to devote to an hour of interview sometimes, for each case that they're a part of. So basically being able to issue this hold and frankly reusing some of the interview questions, if we know, where that person keeps their specific documents, we can actually reuse that information on the next case and really save them and us a lot of time getting to the key facts. So here's sort of an example of, in our case, one of our custodians was issued a legal hold questionnaire asking if they were involved with this matter, asking if they have any knowledge of facts or people that are involved. And then, the other kind of cool thing about the legal hold questionnaire is you can actually make questions sort of dependent on each other. So if they answer yes to the first question, you can actually kind of break off a secondary response where they actually explain. And all of this information, once it's compiled and they're done, it gets sent to the legal hold manager who can then read it, follow up if they need to, or sort of leave, the questionnaire in the records.
So based off this questionnaire, just from this, we had a referral to contact at B&B. So that's a new fact that we have, something that we need to follow up on. So if one person just heard Weatherby say this, they might not necessarily pick up on, we need to find this document, we need to find this source where this came from, this email. When you have it memorialized in legal hold, it's there. Somebody's gonna see it. You have it going through a system where this information doesn't just get lost in translation. So we've got a new referral, we've got a new potential custodian as well. So we've got Thurston Thorogood, who we found out is part of this. So now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna issue a legal hold to Thurston. We're gonna issue a questionnaire to him as well. So then we go ahead, and it's super easy to input into Fact Manager. You can see right here, it works like an Excel spreadsheet, which is great. So that's what most people are used to. Nice and easy to use. You can export this out to Excel as well. So you can enter on the fly. You can also go in, you can link at this point. So we know Thurston Thorogood, we go over and we want to link him to the organization. So he's at Weston Associates. So we can go in there, we can link him to Weston Associates. And now what would happen is later in analysis, we can say, okay, show me everybody at Weston Associates. These are the individuals that are going to show up. So it's letting you build that map, make those connections, put things together. Again, if you had 5 different people learning this information, you might not make these connections that are out there. So Thurston may have never gotten a legal hold because nobody picked up on, oh, we should probably add this guy in. So you can see it's nice and easy to add. And then we're going in and we're adding our fact now. So we can put that fact in about, what is this one? Carbuncle asking for the contact. And then the nice thing is here is you can add things in here in the fields. You can change the choices. So we could put, needs follow-up, new data source. So then you have somebody regularly coming in here through your legal hold process and saying, okay, what are the facts that we have not resolved or we need some follow-up on? Then we figure out, is this a data source? Is this an additional custodian? Is this something else? So again, this is not halfway through reviewing my documents and realizing, oh, I forgot an entire server, or I forgot an entire custodian, and opposing are the ones who requested it, and now I look like an idiot. So again, getting the full picture right up front. So interrogate, this is my favorite part. So the custodian interview. I really like these, and I wish people would do this more. One of the places I worked at, we did some custodian interviews, and individuals really they weren't very technical. And the custodian interviews, the things that we found in these custodian interviews were insane. So the biggest thing is the human factor. You can get whatever IT retention policy, blah, blah, blah is out there. I guarantee you someone is accidentally working around it. They are taking something home, they are printing something out, they are somehow getting things onto flash drives. You never remember, or you can never account for every single thing that a human can screw up, honestly. I screw plenty of stuff up. So they may say, oh yeah, I keep flash drives in my desk drawer with backups of important information. Are you serious? Because the retention policy, all this should be gone. Now there's data we have to collect. But then again, it doesn't pop up, again, halfway through your review. I use my personal computer to create documents and save them on my desktop. Ah, great, that's against company policy, but you're doing it. So you're finding, the other part is finding latent information. So like we were talking about earlier, that custodian with the PSTs, they had no idea what a PST was. So they were sitting there like, I don't make PSTs. I was like, well, do you do this and this on your computer? Oh yeah, you make PSTs. So that's part, this hat is so, okay.
You're done.
Now I have a hat here. So the biggest thing here is that a lot of times they don't know what they're talking about. So it's good to have your tech person available because they're going to pick up on keywords. They're going to hear them say, oh, I click and drag this here, or I do this here. And in that person's mind, they're going, oh, is there another server? Is there this? Do we need to go here? Do we need to go there? So there's always underlying information that you may not pick up on. The other part of having this memorialized and having it in Fact Manager is, let's say I review it and I don't pick up on anything. Julia comes in and reviews it and she's like, oh my God, why aren't we getting this? Why aren't we doing that? So you're getting multiple perspectives on the information. So again, rather than having it scattered, you're bringing it all into one location. So we go and we talk to Thurston, and he saw Carbuncle scanning MRI files, which I was like, great, way not to tell anybody while he was doing it. But Harlan used text messaging on his work phone, which is great to know, so we know that's somewhere that we want to attempt a data source collection. And then Molly Trooper pops up. And so she recently resigned to go to B&B, and she was very close with Harlan. So this may have been something that we never picked up on Molly Trooper. So doing that custodian interview, we get this information. You may have had someone interviewing Thurston who was like, oh, whatever, Molly Trooper. Not good. Memorialize it. Have that data so someone can make a connection. So very quickly, we can put in, go into people, we can add Molly Trooper. And basically what this is allowing us to do now is that we're seeing these connections. So one thing we can do is we can connect Molly to the organization B&B and Weston Associates. Great thing here is that if I'm doing an analysis on B&B, I'm going to see Molly Trooper and Carbuncle. There's a connection there. They're both at B&B, they were both at Weston Associates. Probably want to look pretty closely at their documents and their emails between them. So you're building your story. And when you get to the documents, you already have a story. You already know what documents you want to look for. You're not just going in blind. And there's going to be a blog post on this coming out the week after on the Relativity blog, so watch for it. And one of the, the lovely metaphors we have for this is that you're walking through a forest without a map. So if you think of that show Naked and Afraid, you're naked with nothing. Not fun. I want a map and a backpack and everything else and clothes to get through that forest. So having this information is your map through the forest.
I think one other point is, we talk a lot about memorializing, keeping good records. Earlier in the session, I said, employees don't stay in their job function for long sometimes, right? So same applies to your legal department. Your legal department employees who end up getting, I think, an intimate knowledge of these cases end up leaving, going to a different job or a different department. And now, you've spent, legal proceedings aren't, sometimes they're super quick, but more than likely you're talking about, 3 to 6 months to a year, timeline that you're kind of working on a case. And all of a sudden, the person that had all the knowledge kind of leaves. It's really hard on the case team, and it's really hard to sort of be able to pick up that stuff. But if all of this information is kept in Relativity, people constantly have access to it, different people are adding their information, I think picking up the pieces becomes a lot easier, and you're not thinking, oh no, I have to go, Sarah had some spreadsheet on her computer, I don't even know where it is, and now there was 3 spreadsheets, and which one's the new version? A lot of these kinds of administrative challenges can really be, I think not perfectly eliminated, but certainly minimized.
So once we get all this information together, we want to analyze this information. So what we talked about before, things that are scattered have no meaning. This means nothing to me. There's an MRI machine and some blank people and a scanner. I don't know what goes to what. Once we start putting those connections together, then they start making sense. So we've got Molly, we've got Thurston, we've got this introduction, we've got this MRI, press release, start putting together all of this, and it starts to spark things. So you are a detective in e-discovery, you really are. You are trying to find facts. You're trying to put together the story of what happened, basically. It's not as exciting maybe as a homicide that you want to do or a drug bust, but you're doing the same thing. You're putting that case file together. So the nice thing in here is that you have the ability to filter on the information. So you can very quickly say, hey, I'm doing something and I am just interested in this one individual. Well, let me search for this one individual across the facts. Here's everything that has to do with that individual. There you go. You're ready, prepping for deposition. You're ready to interview somebody. You're ready to write a motion. You have the information at your fingertips. So you can use filtering in here. You can actually go in and see in detail. And then as you go down, you can see the things that are linked. So very quickly, I can see there's an issue with this one, the press release. Go down further, there's a document as well that's linked. So that is the press release, which is great. There's my document backing up this fact. I can see the organization. I can click on that organization and dig into that organization. So that's the other piece, is that as you're digging, you can just keep going into the details. So if you get into something and you're like, well, I want to see a little bit more about this, click on it, then you start analyzing that. So it lets you kind of walk down a path and figure out what's going on. So other than that, you have the kind of the basic layout there. There are reports that you can export. So basically what we saw on the first screen, you export it to an Excel spreadsheet or an HTML, and you can bring the supporting documents out with it, native format or PDF. You can bring the production versions out as well, which is great. So if you're, how people would give, this drives me nuts. I get that like 20-page Word document with a bunch of doc IDs in it, and they're like, can you pull all these for me and then link them up in this? Or, oh my goodness. The number of hours that I would spend searching for those, putting them in that order, getting them together, and then they change them 5 minutes later. It would drive me absolutely out of my mind. I like efficiency. It pisses me off when somebody waits till the end. And it really, they spent probably, 10 hours of my time doing that. When all this information was done in the beginning, so you just paid for somebody to do 10 hours of pulling documents that, as you were reviewing, could have been linked. All of this could have been done because you were building facts. Right. You were doing it to write your motions and everything there. So that's kind of the big thing here, the big takeaway. You can do timeline reports in here. You can do visual reports. You can, if you're more of a visual person, you can see the information that way. And again, you have that option for offline by exporting things out to Excel.
And of course, with Relativity, you can dashboard all these things, right? So if you need to come in and, again, you have sort of a higher level person that needs to hop in there and they need to come in and sort of see, in a more visual way, you can do that pretty easily. So, kind of think of Fact Manager as sort of your digital whiteboard, right? When people like to sort of come and draw and kind of draw out the case and their theory of things, this is sort of the way to do it, but just you don't have to erase it and worry about it being all gone at the end of the day. So, to move forward, once we've done our legal holds, we've gathered the information, we've put it into Fact Manager, we've synthesized it, what are we going to do to sort of move forward? Well, I think most importantly, we talked about legal hold being an iterative process, and that's something that's super important. It's not issue one and done. We have to make sure that we're constantly updating our legal hold and our information based on what we learned. So to move forward, we can identify additional custodians and additional data sources that we might need to add to our list. We continue to expand the fact-finding process, and we continue to document, because at the end of the day, what everybody wants is your kind of neat and tight case notebook and your, to show the defensibility of the case. And that's something, we talk so much about defensibility for like review and analysis and predictive coding, but I feel like some of that stuff isn't necessarily woven through the entire process. Obviously for collections, that's so key, but the legal hold process has to be documented and has to be defensible as well. We can create better requests for collections and processing. So again, in my example of the legal hold drive, you're not processing a terabyte of data to get 300 documents. Every fact that I have and that I've learned point me to these specific folders. So I'm going to target my collection to those folders, and I'm going to be able to defend my reasoning for that because I'm going to be able to show the backup that says, here is, 5 custodians that said they use the legal share, but they only use these 3 folders on it. And then we're going to use, I think most importantly, we're going to use the facts that we find to develop our case. And so what does that mean? We're going to be able to create keywords in a much better way. I feel like now, right, how do folks create keywords? And in my experience, a lot of times it's we've processed data, we're ready to move forward, and we start asking for keywords, and the attorneys are sort of putting them together on the fly. Document unseen, fact unknown. And a lot of times, I think as we all have experienced, the keywords you start with at the beginning of the case are never, the keywords you sort of end up with at the end. So why not be more informed about your keyword terms? For privilege terms, if I'm going to, issue my legal hold questionnaire, one of the questions I certainly want to put up there is, have you talked to any attorneys about this matter? Or who have you worked with? And that's something super important because for example, your IP department might be working with an entirely different set of counsel than your corporate department, which makes complete sense. They have very different, functions and how they advise the business. So generally speaking, they're not using the same counsel. But in our case, R&D and some of this patent work is going to be very different than maybe what the litigation department is going to be working with. So it's really important for me to have I think a good understanding of various legal issues that may come up to make sure that those issues are protected when it comes to the production phase. And it's going to be able to kind of give you some conceptual ideas in order to jumpstart your analytics and predictive coding, because we absolutely want to encourage that and really take those threads throughout our case. And again, most importantly, we're going to be able to use the information we learned, and Sarah sort of alluded to this earlier. So we know, Molly Trooper is the key custodian because she was sort of involved. Now, if I get production from opposing counsel and there's nothing in there with Molly or her emails, I'm going to think that there might be something missing in their case, and I'm going to want to ask, like, did you guys know about, Molly, or did you, look into any documents with her? So I think it really arms you with really great negotiation tactics when you work with opposing as well.
And part of the request for production, bring up something from the judges panel. They were talking, or not the request for production, the metadata portion they were talking about. So you're going to be able to better justify what metadata is critical to the case because you have more information. Mm-hmm. If you just go in there and you're like, well, I think this is what I need, it's not going to help you. So you're giving yourself that backing that you need to make these arguments. And the ESI protocols, like for production, I may know, hey, I really need this in this format to get the information that I need. And then you kind of know where to negotiate. Where can I let go so that I can push for this piece? And then you may have situations where you don't want to give out certain information, and so you don't ask for it on purpose. I've seen that where it's just, we're not even going to bring up this field because hopefully they won't think about it, and it's something that we know, may be an issue for us. So that's part of it, and then part of what the judges were saying as well about keywords. So if you're more informed with your data collection, if you just go out and pull every single server, that's a lot of data. And a lot of times you're not going to want to host that and try to do analytics on that because it's a lot of data. But if you're narrow in your scope, knowing what you need to collect and you're not grabbing all this extra stuff that's not going to be important, you're dealing with a little less data. It's a little bit easier for you to analyze what you've got. So being well informed will save you time and money down the road. So we were debating whether to pose these out to you guys or answer them. So I'm going to pose them out first, and hopefully we have some enthusiastic people who want to give us some answers. So one of them was, why are custodian interviews and questionnaires effective methods for data source and fact identification?
Anybody?
Josh, I know you want to answer this. Has anyone used this in the past? Anyone used Legal Hold? I think it's one of those, I hope you've used it now. It's one of those ones where I think it came out and it was advertised, and I think getting it into the workflow, we're so concerned with reviewing documents, we've lost sight of a lot of the basics. We need to go back to the 101 on a lot of these things. And it's just, you hear, oh my gosh, there's this many terabytes of data, and you immediately just switch to review mode, completely forgetting the fact that
collection and review, right?
Yeah, and that terabyte of data is really terrible if you know nothing about it.
It's also really expensive.
Yep, but if you're informed, you're going to save time, you're going to save money. So Legal Hold is definitely something to look into, try out. And then the fact manager portion, start documenting early. You can use this before, like Julia was saying, before you get your documents. Start putting stuff in there. If you start with an Excel spreadsheet as well, we can import that Excel spreadsheet in. So don't think, oh, I started here and I'm going to have to type everything in. There's a lot we can do to pull that data in bulk for you, so you're not doing that. What is the most powerful aspect of Fact Manager? So does anybody have anything that they saw that they think is the best part of it? Come on, guys. There's free stuff and mustaches. Want to hear some answers?
You can link to the documents, and you're not like moving them out, or everything's all in one
Yep.
place. The documents, the facts, the people, the organizations, everything's all linked in one place.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think a lot of people, it's hard sometimes too when you're used to doing it a certain way and you're like, oh, well, she wants me to do all this stuff up front. But when you really think about it, just take a look at something you've done where you have had to compile information, either chronology or something where you've had to pull those doc IDs out of that Word document. Look how much time you build to that. And just take a second to understand, hey, I spent this much money and this much time. The work that was already being done, it's being done. Someone just had to do a couple extra clicks or have one person organizing. And you can have a paralegal, you can have somebody on your team who's dedicated to this. And I recommend having 1 to 2 people doing your fact manager, kind of organizing it and keeping it together. Because if you have everybody in there, you're going to put a bunch of facts in there and then it doesn't make sense. So keep it clean. Again, garbage in, garbage out. It's a great tool when you use it the right way.
I'm big on not having extrinsic documentation outside of my tool because, again, sometimes you lose it or version control becomes an issue. So I'm really big on using Relativity to really maintain all my documentation, and whether that's just intelligently naming saved searches, so it's not just initials and a date, like the saved search actually tells me what the documents are bringing back. You can apply that same idea to Fact Manager. Use Fact Manager as your, document of record or your system of record, so you're not worried about having an Excel spreadsheet on this person's computer and a Word document there, and these questionnaires stored somewhere else. Keep them all in one place because they'll be much easier to find, particularly when you're under pressure and getting ready for, a pretty, extensive deposition or witness binders where time is of the essence. Really take the time up front where you have a little bit more, leeway to do some of this work, and it'll save you a bunch of time at the end.
So what makes legal hold and fact manager a power couple? And I think we've kind of, are you, oh, yes.
How is it with the reporting, for example, like a tool that's kind of like fact manager, but the same concept is case manager?
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
How is it? Is it just exporting out CSV files, or can you go in there and report like on an issue document?
So it doesn't do, I know what you're talking about, the little, it's like a booklet almost that it makes. So it doesn't make the booklet per se. So what it does, it comes out in pretty much the same format you see it on the screen. Either in Excel or the HTML one has links within it. So you can click it and it'll open the PDF or the native on the export. But it doesn't do that, like that summary judgment one where it would do that piece. So really it's more of a, you kind of just copy and paste it in. And a lot of the stuff that it did in those templates, it really just put some fancy titles on it and some cover sheets. But it's generally the same because you filter down to what you need, pull that out, and it's literally at that point just a copy and paste over to get it in there. But yeah, I know what you're talking about, and it is very similar to Case Map. It just has that extra linking power. And I know at one time they had you could push back and forth from Case Map, and it's clunky, it's hard to use, and this is just, it's seamless because you're reviewing, and in your coding panel, you're linking as you're going.
Yeah, one thing I like about it is I don't have to say it locally on
Yep.
Yep.
make changes and then bring it back and then.
It's updates on the fly. That's right.
Yeah, because I remember, some of the things with Case Map where you'd have to go and refresh it, and then, it's happening as you're doing it, which is wonderful. Obviously, if you export something, you want to regenerate it, but it comes out in a nice little zip, and it's pretty quick to do it. And then you have the visual as well, so it does have visual timelines. You can color code them, you can do, for the dates, it does on, around, or between, but it gives you a nice visual chronology, and then you can save that to a PDF, you can put that out to a JPEG, you can put that out to an Excel with all the data as well with it, so you have a lot of options there. But I know what you're talking about, it doesn't do all the fancy cover sheets, but again, it's a custom object, so you can make it do things that you would like it to do as well. So that's the other great thing about this. Again, you're dealing with relativity. You can customize things. You can make things work the way you want them to.
Right. And whereas Case Map obviously is a proprietary product, it's going to be difficult to go to Lexis and say, hey, I want this customization. If you have a good development team that you're working with, that's something that is easily customizable. I think the other kind of good thing about it, at least with Relativity, all their modules basically have the functionality is very similar. So if you're used to doing production or review in Relativity, I think picking up a new module or application like Legal Holder Fact Manager, it's a lot easier because generally where the buttons live and how it's organized, which obviously with Case Map you're learning kind of a new tool, a different tool, and I think there's a lot more training that's involved, whereas this is just a lot more seamless. I'm not saying, Case Manager I think is a fabulous tool. I just find that something like this is just much easier to integrate into a workflow that's already using a lot of Relativity's existing modules.
Hopefully nobody's in love with LexisNexis here.
Right,
from
because
so the power couple between Legal Hold and Fact Manager, you're going out, you're finding the information, and you're documenting it. That's really what this is. You're interrogating and you're analyzing, and then you're going back and you're interrogating. I love the word interrogate. I don't know why. Don't actually beat up your custodians and do like the bad cop thing, but go back, get that more information that you need, document it. You make those connections, then you go back and you do it again. So, and again, it's automated with the legal hold process. So it's great to have that where it's reminding you. You can look, you can say, who did I send stuff to? There it is, right there. So together, it really is a time and cost savings. Again, it's just doing it up front. Don't do it at the end. I have so many people who come to me and they're right about to go to deposition and they're like, can we do Fact Manager? You can, but you already did all the work and you're redoing it. So get involved with it early. And this is, you can, this is with Relativity. It's not something you have to pay for, the fact manager. So install it in a test workspace, put some facts in, play around with it, play around with the coding panel, because that's the other thing. You can customize how it shows up on the coding panel. They give you a coding panel, but you can add the associative objects on there, and you can make it work the way that you want it to work and you need it to work for your case. So it's a great thing to play around with, figure out how it falls into your workflow. Find somebody who is a little more tech savvy, who's not kind of set in their ways. Don't get the guy who won't have a computer on his desk, like smoking a cigar in his office. That's not going to be good for you.
I know that guy. I used to work for him.
I had an attorney like that. So find somebody who's tech savvy and wanting to try something new. Get them on a case to try it out and give yourself something that you can go to other attorneys and say, hey, look, we did a case similar to this. This is the amount of time we spent on the end trying to get ready for depositions, trying to get ready for trial, we found all this stuff we didn't know about, surprises. Look at this case where we used it. Show them the efficiencies, show them the cost savings. Because again, you're trying to introduce something that's not in their normal workflow. They're probably going to fight you a little bit on it. I've hit a rock with this several times. Josh back there hated it until I have slowly converted him to to liking it and using it. And now we pitch it a lot more. And a lot of people are seeing that, hey, this really is, I'm already doing this work. That's the other thing. You're already doing this. Why not make it help you? So that's it.
That's it. Any questions for us? Yeah.
To get away from the list of doc items, what is your best practice recommendation in terms of least amount of work to be done to get somebody away from the list and start using doc items?
So the biggest thing is get in at the start of the case. So when they're building that Word document, they're building it as they go. So they're basically, there's facts in it. There's sections and facts. So talk to them in a way and say, hey, instead of writing it into Word, you're going to write it here. And you're still going to write that sentence that you would have written or that paragraph, and then you're going to link the document so you're typing out that doc ID anyway. That's the other part I always tell them. You're sitting there typing that doc ID. If you type it in here, then it'll just make the link for you, and it's done. And then when it's time to be done with that Word document, you export out that Excel, you have all the documents with you, you just copy those cells, you paste them into Word, you clean them up with formatting, and there you go. That's your Word document. So it's hard though because you're trying to tell somebody to do something a different way. So it's just one of those things where if you can find a small case and kind of show them, or if you take their Word document and put it into Fact Manager and show them and say, hey,
Here's what I did.
here's what it would have looked like, and let me show you how it exports out, then we're not sitting here doing that. Because you're going to spend the time finding the documents anyway,
Right.
so you can set that up. But it's changing the mindset, I think, is the hardest part. So, and that's I worked for the state government, and everybody loved paper. They hated me. They thought I was the most evil person in the world. And it took me 2 years probably to really get people on board. But it was going to them and sometimes doing that extra work myself to make them see, hey,
Value, yeah.
this is what it would look like. And it's not impeding your workflow. And then make it so it's almost their idea. So they see it and they're like, oh, I'm going to use that. It's great. But that's probably the biggest hurdle to get over with this. Yeah.
Got a question back there?
Let's say if we had a case with similar facts, if we have a case and just have this fact, we already basically clone it, but there's going to be different set of issues.
Yeah, so you would you'd export out to Excel, and then you
And
can actually
re-import.
mass import. Yeah, and the links.
Yep.
Yeah, the
Exactly.
linking though might be off because it's going to do the linking based on, no, it does the linking based on the name. So if you have facts and they're linked to people, as long as you imported those people, those links should come in for you using the same name. So you can't adjust anything when you pull it over. And then if it's new issues, you just have to go through and tag the new or link the new issues to those facts. But yep.
Yeah, because I feel like that comes up a lot when you have a particular. I've worked on patent cases where one company sues you, another one that's making a similar product might come back and do the same thing. So a lot of times your fact patterns don't change a whole lot. It's just your kind of defending it just to another, against another company. And so those are really great opportunities to, not have to start from scratch, but just to use what you've already done and just change things here and there.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
So when you fill out the survey, remember how wonderful we are?
And we have some, as part of kind of going with the theme, we have some magnifying glasses and flashlights, so you guys can also super sleuth in your own life. So please feel free. There's some mustaches. You can be the Sherlock as well. So feel free to come up and grab some swag.
Tell people tomorrow we
that
are
you can
here
get
at
swag, yeah.
2:45. I think we're in like PDR
A different
1.
room,
Yeah.
yeah.
So wear your mustaches and be like, you want a mustache? You want some swag? You should come to Sarah and Julia's thing. And then we're kind of bribing you to give us all good things on our survey. So
Thank you very much,
thanks
everyone.
everybody for coming.